Hello, everyone, and welcome to part one of our lecture on chapter 12 Measures of Interests and Values. In part one of our lecture, we are going to focus on the measures of interest. And we really can't talk about measures of interest without going into the history of why interest measures exist. And when Frank Parsons wrote his book, Choosing a Vocation, in 1909, psychologists and counselors have since been trying to devise different ways to measure one's career interests, which has oftentimes been reduced down to asking participants how much they like and dislike certain activities. And there are two common types of scales that make up interest inventories: general or basic general or basic interest scales and occupational scales. General scales, such as the basic interest scales of the strong interest inventory, which we will talk about in greater detail in this lecture, evaluates an individual's interest in broad areas. These scales usually involve clustering items that logically fit together. So it is used through what we call the rational process. Logically, these items fit together, so they make sense. They are interested in one another, and that's why we've grouped them together. The occupational scales then assess an individual's interest in comparison to others in specific occupations. Scale development for occupational scales involves the empirical process, and items are selected based on how well they differentiate amongst groups. So, how much your items are specific to you and the group that you identify with, and how those are not similar to other groups. So, that differentiation amongst interest groups. And interest inventories may be useful for generating academic or career possibilities, confirming previous academic or career choices, aiding in decision making amongst majors or occupations, and in assisting individuals in considering ways in which a particular career path may be adapted in the future to maximize their career satisfaction. So interest inventories really match and sort of delve into various aspects of both education and career in terms of determining satisfaction in the world of work. There are some popular or common interest inventories, and those include the Strong Interest Inventory, the Campbell Interest and Skills Survey, the Cooter Career Search with Person Match, the Self-Directed Search, the Career Decision Making System Revised, and the Jackson Vocational Interest Survey. We will talk about each of these in a little bit more detail here. So to start, let's talk a little bit more about the Strong Interest Inventory. Oftentimes it's just called the Strong, and the Strong was most recently revised in 2004 and is widely used and has extensive psychometric and research support. So it is actually the most common inventory of interest amongst our current assessments. Within the Strong, there are 6 sections, and those sections include occupations, subject areas, activities, leisure activities, people, and your characteristics. For the first 5 sections, individuals rate on a 5-point scale the degree to which they like an occupation, subject area, or activity. For the last section, individuals indicate on a 5-point scale the degree to which the particular characteristic describes them. Within the Strong, there are 3 administrative indices as well. And these indices provide information about response percentages, total response index, and your typical responses, or the typicality index. And these administrative indices are particularly helpful because as an assessor, we look at the administrative indices to determine if a client's report is valid, if they answered the questions honestly, if they were consistent in their responses, if they were limiting themselves in their social desirability. because if a report is invalid based on these administrative indices, then none of the information past that first page of the administrative indices is worth reading because the client wasn't truthful. The Strong also contains two sets of general scales, and those include the general occupation themes and the basic interest scales. The general occupation themes represent 6 scales that provide an overview of an individual's profile, and those 6 scales are classified according to John Holland's RIASEC model, which includes the interest categories of realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional interests. And the general occupation themes match the individual based on their individual profile. So, what is your profile? Amongst these 6 interests, which 3 are the highest for you? And it provides a code for the client. So, the code is the first 3 interest categories that are the highest for that person in order. So, maybe the client is an AIC. So, they're artistic, they're investigative, and they're conventional, whatever that means for the client, but the general occupation themes will give the code for that. Within the general occupation theme, in addition to the general occupation theme, there are also 30 basic interest scales. And I forgot to mention this, that the general occupation themes are based on 122 paired items that are presented to the client. Within the basic interest scales, there are 30 specific BISs, basic interest scales, that function as subscales to the general occupation themes. These particular scales help the individual to note interest patterns associated with different occupations. So the general occupation themes show the client what areas within each of the RIASEC model they score the highest, and then the basic interest scales expand on that and help the individual see if there's any patterns in the things that they're interested in. Both the general occupation scales or the general occupation themes and the basic interest scales have been standardized so that they combine groups of men and women included in the norms. So the gender differences in any of the interest categories are based on the group for which the basic interest and the general occupation themes were normed. So when someone gets their results, they will see how they compare to everyone on average, as well as how they compare to men of their certain age or women of their particular age. Unfortunately, the strong interest inventory is limited to only binary categories of gender. And I think it's interesting to note that gender differences are most notable on scales in the realistic category, both as general occupation themes and as basic interest inventories. So, as I mentioned, there are 122 pairs of items that constitute these additional occupational scales of the strong, and these scales differentiate significantly the interests of men and women. The occupational scales have been normed on men and women in a particular occupation. So basically, the occupation scales tell the client what the RIASEC codes are for gender matched individuals in the occupations of interest to the client based on the likes and dislikes of the people who are already working in that profession or in that occupation. So here are what people who share a similar gender to you say that they like and dislike, and here's how much it matches with your own likes and dislikes. And that's what the occupational scales are. Also, within the strong interest inventory, it will yield 5 bipolar personal style scales that evaluate personality factors associated with educational and career planning activities. Those 5 bipolar personal scales include work style, learning environment, leadership style, risk-taking adventure, and team orientation. And these personality scales are all intended to provide information concerning personality factors that might be associated with the client's career development that they might not always be aware of, or might they be aware of but don't have a way to describe it. There are also two alternative and supplemental assessments that are associated with the Strong, and those include the Strong Interest Explorer and the Skills Confidence Inventory, Expanded Skills Confidence Inventory. And the Strong Interest Explorer is an abbreviated version of the full Strong and is designed for use with individuals as young as grade 8 and higher, but typically isn't used after senior year in high school, or at the very least, like early college. And then the Skills Confidence Inventory or Expanded Skills Confidence Inventory is particularly useful to supplement information about interests with information related to career self-efficacy. So how confident the client is in their own abilities. And like I said, the Strong Interest Inventory is the most popular interest inventory that's used today, but there are some additional interest inventories that are out there that are used depending on the clinician and the client. And one of those is the Campbell Interest and Skills Survey, which is one of the tools associated with the Campbell Development Surveys, and parallels some of the Strong scales, but offers self-report skill scales to match their interest scales. So the Campbell Interest Skills and Skills Survey provides 7 orientation scales, 29 basic scales, 60 occupational scales, and 3 spatial scales measuring academic focus, extroversion, and variety. And the reason why the Campbell Interest and Skills Survey is particularly useful is that it differs from the Strong in that it provides unisex occupational scales. So the Campbell Interest Inventory can be really helpful for folks who are gender expansive or gender non-conforming because the Strong is only limited to the binary of gender. The Campbell can be really helpful as an alternative because it does parallel a lot of the same interests and sort of scales that are used in the Strong. We also have the Cooter Career Search with Person Match, which is a part of the Cooter Career Planning System and is also referred to as the Cooter Career Assessment Instrument. And this particular interest inventory includes multiple levels to cater to different age groups. So they have one that's called Cooter Galaxy, Cooter Navigator, and Cooter Journey, and each of those are associated with different age groups. So you can really tailor the assessment to the age of your client. Overall, this inventory includes 32 forced choice triads for which an individual selects from 3 activities, which one they would most prefer, which one they would least prefer, and which one they don't care about in relation to each other. So an example might be presenting the client with the 3 options: build a birdhouse, write articles about birds, or draw sketches of birds. And then the client ranks them in order according to their preference. And this use of the forced choice item makes it possible for clinicians to control for response styles such as acquiescence, which is when clients mark like to most items, but it can also account for deviation, which occurs when clients make extreme responses to most items. The clients who take the Cooter Career Search with Person Match will receive a score on 6 career clusters, similar to Holland's RIASEC themes, along with scores for 10 activity preference scales that map onto career clusters. The Cooter Career Search has been designed to help clients identify and explore various career possibilities, and clients are provided with detailed descriptions of the type of work pursued by individuals with their same interests. So this process helps clients to realize their multi-potentiality and recognizing that there are various options available to them, which isn't always as obvious in the Strong Interest Inventory, even though it provides clients with a plethora of information. A lot of times clients get overwhelmed with the amount of content and they just focus on what has been recommended as like their top 2 career choices. The Cooter, on the other hand, really focuses on providing clients with multiple options that will maximize all of their potential. And we also have the Self-Directed Search, or the SDS, which is in its fifth edition and was created by and based on John Holland's theory of vocational choice, in which you really focus on the congruence between a person and environment And you examine that in order to determine career satisfaction. So the same 6 reset categories are used to identify personality clusters and then are used to categorize occupational environments. In the most simplest terms, the client rates their personality on the reset codes, and then the SDS matches that person to careers that hold similar reset codes, because the idea is that the client is more likely to experience satisfaction if their interests of their career match their interests and their personality. The SDS is really helpful because it's completely self administered, self scored, and self interpreted. Within the SDS, there are 5 components, and those include the Occupations Finder, the You and Your Career Booklet, Educational Opportunities Finder, Leisure Activities Folder, and the SDS Professional Manual. Many of the codes that Holland and his colleagues sort of developed for each of the careers were based primarily on judgments of job analysts and not on research. So there is occasionally differences in the codes that are provided in self-directed search that may differ from other interest inventories such as the strong. And when there is a difference, because the SDS goes off of job analyst judgments and not research, which is what supports the codes that are provided in the strong, the default is to go to the codes that have research backing to support what the code is. So more of the code that's provided by the strong interest inventory. And although the SDS is classified as an interest inventory, it's actually an inventory of both interests and abilities. Holland actually referred to it as a career counseling simulation. And within the SDS, there are 5 sections: occupational daydreams, activities, competencies, occupations, and self assessments, which John Holland designed as being part of what he called that career simulation. What is going to be expected of you in the career, on the job, when you're doing the work, and then using that information to inform both how you are actually going to do in your abilities, but also how that maps to your interests. It may be advisable to supplement the SDS with the My Vocational Situation Inventory, which measures aspects of vocational identity that are not measured by the SDS, in order to capture the most comprehensive view of the client and to ascertain which clients may need additional vocational counseling. And then the final 2 other popular interest inventories that I want to talk to you about include the Career Decision Making System and the Jackson Vocational Interest Survey. So the Career Decision Making System Revised is a brief tool with which middle and high school students or post-secondary students and adults can take this interest inventory. Clients are asked to rate themselves in terms of interests, school subjects, work values, abilities, and education plans, which will then reveal career clusters for the client to investigate further. So it provides them with these clusters of careers that are saying, these match what you have described as being most like you. Here's where you can go from here and what you should look into, which is why this particular interest inventory is used with high school and college aged individuals to really inform both deciding what one's major in school will be and what career field they will go into. And then the Jackson Vocational Interest Survey is designed for use with high school students who select between 289 pairs of items of interest associated with various job-related activities. This particular interest inventory parallels many of the strong scales, but it differs in that it measures academic interests and focuses on occupational clusters instead of specific occupations. The Jackson Vocational Interest Survey also includes items that measure interests in different types of work environments. So they call these their work style items, as well as different types of work activities or work role items. So it includes a little bit more of an expansive and generalized view of vocational choice that in the strong is much more narrow. And that's why the Jackson Vocational is so helpful for younger students, because it is allowing them these sort of general areas to explore further, as opposed to saying, here's where you're going to be in a good career, you're going to be satisfied, and then they only focus on that one. So that is where we are going to wrap up part 1 of our lecture on chapter 12. Join me for the second part of our lecture, where we are going to dive into values inventories. I will see you all in the next lecture.